You ever been so in love it made you stupid? I'm talking real, can't eat, can't sleep, lose track of time stupid. Because I have. And hell, I was 23. Stupid was a full-time job back then. It was 1993, back when jeans were baggy, hair was big, and MTV still played music. I lived in a grimy little studio above a liquor store in Baltimore, worked the graveyard shift at a copy shop, and spent most of my free time sketching faces I saw on the street. My life was small, a little bit messy, but it was mine. Then he walked in and changed everything. His name was Jonah. First time I saw him was a Tuesday, around 2 in the morning. I had just finished my shift and was walking home. The street was dead, just flickering neon signs and the smell of fried food from some place that had already closed. I passed this dive bar called Vespers, the kind of place that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the 80s. Jonah stumbled out, cigarette dangling from his mouth, and bumped into me. "You got a light?" he asked, eyes bloodshot but focused. I didn't smoke, but I carried a lighter because I liked the sound it made. I handed it over. Our fingers touched, just a flash of contact, but something about it short-circuited my brain. He lit up, took a drag, and exhaled like he was finally breathing again. "You look like you just escaped a cubicle fire," he said. I laughed. "Copy shop, actually. 10-hour shift." "Oof, brutal." He took another drag. "You hungry?" I looked at him. "It's 2 a.m. Exactly," he said, and grinned. "Perfect time for pancakes." I should have said no. I didn't know this guy, but something about him. The tired eyes, the ripped leather jacket, the way he said it like we were already friends, made me follow him to an all-night diner 3 blocks down. We got coffee and greasy food, sat across from each other in a cracked vinyl booth with a flickering lamp overhead, talked for hours. He told me he played bass in a punk band that mostly played basements and half-empty bars, said he bartended at some dive on 22nd to pay the bills. Showed me a tattoo on his wrist, just a small black square. Said it meant something only he understood. I didn't ask what. He asked me about my art. I told him I mostly painted people. Strangers, lovers, once even a guy the first saw crying in the back of a bus. "You ever paint someone while they're sleeping?" he asked. "No, you should," he said. Then he leaned in just enough that I could smell smoke and sweat and something sweet underneath. "Start with me." I barely slept that night. Just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about his eyes, his mouth, the way he stirred his coffee like it was a ritual. I didn't know it yet, but that was the start of the craziest, most beautiful mess I'd ever get myself into. And believe me, it only got wilder from there. The next night, I waited, told myself I wasn't, but I was. Sat in my apartment pretending to sketch, kept glancing out the window like some noir movie cliche. It was stupid. I didn't even have his number. All I had was his name, and a look in his eyes I couldn't stop thinking about. And then, around midnight, I heard footsteps on the metal stairs outside. A knock. When I opened the door, there he was. Jonah, holding 2 coffees in a paper bag. "You look like a guy who skips dinner," he said, walking in like he'd been there 100 times. He dropped the bag on my tiny kitchen table and looked around. "Damn. You weren't kidding. You really do live above a liquor store." "Authentic city living," I muttered, still trying to process that he was actually here. He pulled out 2 breakfast sandwiches and flopped down on my second-hand futon like he owned the place. We ate. We talked. We didn't turn on the TV. The room was dim, and every now and then our knees would bump, or our eyes would catch, and neither of us would look away fast enough. I kept telling myself it was nothing. He was just being friendly, casual, chill. But then he asked, "You got any of your paintings here?" I hesitated. I didn't show people my stuff. Not unless I had to. He raised an eyebrow, waiting. I pulled out a couple canvases from behind the closet door, laid them against the wall. Most were portraits, people I saw on buses, in waiting rooms, the kind of faces no one else looked twice at, Jonah stared at them for a long time. "Damn," he said finally. "These are good." "Yeah?" I said, way too quietly. He turned to me. "You see people the way nobody else does." I looked away, suddenly aware of how close we were sitting. "I just paint what I feel." "Exactly," he said. "That's the part most people can't do." It got quiet after that. Not awkward, just heavy. Like something was hanging in the air, waiting to drop. He looked at me and said, "You ever painted someone you were in love with?" I froze. I was afraid to even answer. He didn't push, just looked at me a second longer, then stood up and stretched. "I should head out." I walked him to the door. He turned before stepping outside, leaned against the frame, and said, "Let me know when you want to paint me." He left without another word. That night, I didn't sleep again. I started sketching him from memory. His jawline, the curl of his lip, the way his eyes caught light, even in the dark. Every detail burned into me like muscle memory. It became a pattern. Every few nights he'd show up, sometimes late, sometimes just before sunrise, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with whiskey. We never talked about what it was. Just let the nights pile up like records on the floor. Then one night, it changed. It was a Thursday. I remember because I'd gotten paid that day and treated myself to an actual dinner that didn't involve instant noodles or gas station snacks. I was standing at the sink doing dishes when there was a knock. No surprise. It was Jonah. But this time, he looked off. Not drunk, not high, just quiet. His usual smirk was missing, and his eyes had this restless edge like he'd been pacing all night before deciding to come over. "You good?" I asked, drying my hands. He nodded, stepped in without a word, and closed the door behind him. I waited for the usual. Some joke, a comment about the smell of turpentine, something casual. But he just sat on the edge of the futon, head in his hands. "Rough night?" He didn't answer, just sat there, so I did the only thing I could think to do. I sat next to him. We sat like that for a while, side by side, the silence stretching. Then he said, "My band broke up." I blinked. "Shit, I'm sorry," he shrugged. "It was coming. No one showed up to rehearsal. Drummer took a job in Boston. Our singer's in rehab again. Just feels like I'm the last one holding on to something that's already gone." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. Then he looked at me, not a glance. He looked at me. His hand moved, slow and unsure, and he touched my thigh. Not in a sexual way, just a touch. Fingers pressing down like he needed to know I was real. I didn't move. His eyes were still on me, searching for something I wasn't sure I knew how to give. You ever feel like you're trying so hard not to fall apart that you forget what it feels like to just be held? The air went still. He wasn't joking, wasn't flirting. He was bare. Honest. So I nodded. "Yeah," I said, more than I want to admit. And then, slowly, he leaned forward and rested his forehead against my shoulder. I didn't know what to do, but I put my arm around him. We sat like that, two 20-something idiots in a dim little apartment, clinging to something we hadn't named yet. Eventually he pulled back. His eyes were glassy but not crying. "Sorry," he mumbled. "Don't be." He stood. "I should go." I didn't try to stop him, but right before he stepped out, he turned and looked at me one more time. "I'm coming back tomorrow," he said. "Okay, and if I ask you to paint me, like really paint me, don't hold back." I didn't sleep that night either. I just stood at my easel and started sketching from memory. The curve of his spine, the sadness in his shoulders, the way his hand felt on my leg. I didn't know what we were, but I knew it wasn't nothing. The next night, I cleaned my whole place. Not because I thought Jonah cared about mess, but because I needed something to do with my nerves. I didn't know what he meant by really paint me. I didn't know if he'd actually show. He did. Right on time. Midnight again. This time he didn't knock. just opened the door, stepped inside, and leaned against it like he needed a second to remember how to breathe. "You serious?" I asked. He looked at me and nodded once. "Yeah, you got paint ready?" I did. He sat on the edge of the futon while I set up my easel. I pulled out a fresh canvas, big one. I didn't ask what he wanted to wear. I didn't ask if he was sure. I just turned and looked at him and waited. Jonah stood up slowly, shrugged off his jacket, and pulled his shirt over his head. I kept my eyes on his face. He was built like someone who worked hard for what little strength he had. Nothing gym-toned, just wiry muscle and old bruises. There were tattoos I'd never seen before, one on his shoulder, a dagger through a rose, another along his ribs. Script I couldn't read. He watched me watch him. "Is this okay?" he asked, voice quieter than usual. I nodded. "Yeah, it's okay." He sat back down, shirtless now, eyes locked on mine. The room was warm, but my hands were cold as I picked up the charcoal and started sketching. We didn't talk much while I worked. Just music playing low from the radio, some forgotten jazz station fading in and out. His breathing slowed as I drew. His shoulders relaxed. Every so often I'd glance up, and he'd be watching me. After maybe half an hour, I stopped. "Can I move?" he asked, cracking his neck. "Yeah." He stood and walked over, still bare-chested, looking at the canvas. His expression didn't change much, but he didn't look away for a long time. "That's really me?" he asked. "That's how I see you." Jonah let out a breath like he'd been holding it in for years. Then he reached out, touched the edge of the canvas, just the frame, like he didn't want to smudge anything. "You ever think about kissing me?" he asked, out of nowhere. I froze. "What?" He looked up at me. "You heard me." I didn't answer right away. My heart was punching the inside of my ribs. He stepped closer. "Because I think about kissing you. Every damn time I'm here." Still, I said nothing, not because I didn't want to, but because if I opened my mouth, I was pretty sure all that would come out was a sound I couldn't explain. Jonah stood there, inches away. He smelled like sweat and cigarettes and the faintest hint of aftershave. He tilted his head like he was reading me, really reading me. Then he leaned in. And finally, he kissed me. Not soft, not hesitant. Like he'd been waiting all this time and couldn't hold back anymore. My body reacted before my brain could catch up. I kissed him back, my hand gripping his waist, his fingers sliding into my hair. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't clean. It was real. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "Told you I'd be back." I woke up to sunlight cutting through the dusty blinds, striping my floor like a barcode. My head was still foggy, but my body knew before I even opened my eyes. He was still there. Jonah. Lying next to me, half under the sheets, bare chest rising and falling slowly, like he finally let himself sleep. He looked younger in the daylight, less jaded, less guarded. His lashes were long and dark, and there was a tiny scar near his eyebrow I'd never noticed before. I could have watched him breathe all morning. And for a few minutes I did, but then his eyes fluttered open, and just like that, the spell was broken. He blinked up at me, smirked sleepily, and said, "You always stare at people like that. Only when they kiss me like you did." That earned a laugh. Quiet, scratchy, warm. We laid there, tangled and bare and unsure of the rules now. It was like we were both waiting for the other to panic. But neither of us did. "Was last night a mistake?" I asked finally. Jonah turned on his side, propped his head up on one arm. "You want it to be?" "No," I said, before I could stop myself. "Then it wasn't." That should have been the end of it. The start of something simple. But Jonah wasn't built for simple, and neither was I. Not back then. We got dressed slowly, like we were trying to ease back into reality. He helped me make coffee, and we drank it out of chipped mugs by the window. "I gotta head out," he said, setting his cup down. "Work in a few hours." I nodded. "You coming back?" He didn't answer right away, just gave me that look. The one I was learning meant too much, too fast, too scared. "I don't know," he admitted. This feels big." "It is big," I said. "Doesn't mean it's bad." He nodded slowly, like he wanted to believe me. Before he left, he kissed me again. Quieter this time. Slower, like he didn't want to forget how it felt. Then he walked out, leaving my door open behind him. That whole day, I couldn't think. I tried to paint, but nothing came out right. Every song on the radio sounded like it was about him. He didn't show up that night. Or the next. Or the one after that. I told myself not to freak out. That he just needed space. But after a week, I started to wonder if that night was all I was gonna get. And just when I thought I'd been ghosted for good, he came back. But not alone. It was a Saturday night when I heard the knock. My heart did this stupid, hopeful thing in my chest. I opened the door with a smile already on my face, and then froze. Jonah was standing there all right, but so was someone else. A guy. Shorter than Jonah, with bleached hair and a smirk like he knew something I didn't. He had his arms slung casually over Jonah's shoulder, like they'd been doing this a while. "Hey," Jonah said. His voice was flat. Unreadable. I stood there, door halfway open, trying to figure out what the hell this was supposed to be. "This is Drew," he added. "He's cool." Drew gave me a once-over, then winked. "So this is the artist." I didn't say anything. Couldn't. My stomach had already dropped. Jonah must have seen it in my face, because he cleared his throat and added, "We were just out. I thought I'd stop by." "Out where?" "Bar near 22nd, place with the jukebox." "The one where we—" I stopped. "Never mind." The air between us was already sour. Jonah shifted, awkward. "We can come back another time." I opened the door wider. "No." "Come in." They did. I regretted it immediately. Drew made himself comfortable, flopping onto my futon like it was his. Jonah stood awkwardly near the wall, hands in his pockets like he wasn't sure why he'd brought this guy here either. I sat across from them, heart pounding, trying to act normal, cool, detached. "You still painting?" Jonah asked. I shrugged. "Yeah, some nights." Drew leaned over, grabbed one of the canvases near the wall. "These yours? Damn, you've got a thing for sad eyes, huh?" I snatched it from him. "Don't touch that." He held up his hands. "Relax, Picasso." Jonah didn't say a word. Just watched the whole thing unravel. Finally, I stood up. "Why'd you come here, Jonah?" He looked up at me, and for the first time since walking in, there was something raw in his face. "I don't know," he said. Drew laughed. "Wow. Deep." Jonah turned to him, jaw tight. "Drew, go wait in the car." Drew blinked. "Seriously?" Jonah didn't answer, just stared. Drew rolled his eyes, stood up, and walked out with all the drama of a soap opera exit. I shut the door behind him, then turned back to Jonah. "What the hell was that?" I asked. Jonah ran a hand through his hair. "I messed up." "No shit. I didn't know if we were something," he said, and that scared me. "So you brought another guy to my door?" He winced. "It was stupid. I know." We stood there, silence pressing in. Then he said, "That night, when we kissed, it wasn't just a moment for me, but it felt big. And when things feel big, I panic. I ruin them." I swallowed hard. "You didn't ruin it, not yet. But you're sure as hell trying." Jonah looked at me then, really looked. And for the first time, I saw the kid under the leather jacket. The one who just wanted to be wanted, but didn't know how to believe it when it happened. "I'm sorry," he said. I didn't know what to say, so I just stepped closer, close enough that he had to look up at me. "Don't come back here with anyone else," I said. He nodded. "I won't." "Next time you're scared, say it. Don't burn the place down just because you think it'll collapse anyway." That hit him. And then, because I couldn't help myself, I kissed him again, just once. Soft. Slow. Forgiving. Jonah didn't leave that night. After Drew drove off, peeling down the street like a cliche, Jonah stayed. We didn't talk much. Didn't need to. He sat on the edge of the bed while I turned off the lights, then crawled in beside me, like it was the most natural thing in the world. And for the first time since he kissed me, it felt easy. No tension, no panic, just quiet breathing in a dark room, two hearts slowing down at the same rhythm. In the morning, I made coffee while he stood behind me in nothing but his jeans, arms wrapped around my waist. He rested his chin on my shoulder like we'd been doing this for years. And maybe, in some invisible way, we had. We didn't make any declarations, no boyfriend talk, no rules, but from that day forward, it was just us. All in. Messy and clumsy and real. Jonah kept showing up, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with a song he'd written on a napkin, sometimes with a black eye from a bar fight he wouldn't explain. I'd patch him up while he grumbled, then he'd fall asleep with his head in my lap while I sketched him over and over. He had his moods, walls that went up for no reason. Nights where he'd vanish for hours and come back smelling like smoke and regret, but he always came back. And I kept painting. He became the center of every canvas. His hands. His laugh. His loneliness. The gallery show happened a year later, my first one. The collection was all portraits of Jonah. Not him posing, not him smiling. Just him, the way I saw him, when no one else was watching. People called it raw. Vulnerable. One critic said it looked like I'd painted someone I loved without realizing I was in love. Jonah came to the opening, wore a black button-down shirt I'd never seen before, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He didn't say much. Just stood in front of one of the paintings, the one where he's lying on my floor, arms behind his head, staring up like he's waiting for a storm to pass. "That how you see me?" he asked. "Sometimes." "And the rest of the time?" I looked at him. "I see someone who's trying really hard not to fall apart." He turned to me, something in his expression cracking. "You make me want to try harder." I kissed him in the middle of the gallery. Right there, under cheap track lights and bad champagne and too many strangers watching. Because for once, I didn't care. I wanted him. All of him. Even the parts that didn't fit in a frame. That was over 30 years ago. Feels like someone else's life sometimes. Like a film reel stuck on loop in the back of my mind. But when the nights get too quiet, when the old heater in my apartment hums like it's whispering secrets, I see him again. Jonah. Leather jacket. Cigarette smile. The way he used to look at me like I was the only person in the room who understood the chaos behind his eyes. We didn't make it forever. That part still stings to say. 2 years after the gallery show, he left for Chicago. Said a friend had a band there, and he wanted a fresh start. I asked him if that meant without me. He didn't answer. He just kissed me at the train station, one long goodbye that tasted like whiskey and tears, then boarded the 813 and disappeared. He wrote me twice. The first letter was all energy, all plans, gigs he'd played, songs he'd written, how he finally got sober. The second was shorter, just 3 lines. "I miss the way you saw me. I'm trying to see me that way too. Hope you're still painting." I never heard from him again. I don't know if he's still out there. I hope he is. Some nights I take out the old sketchbooks, charcoal stained, pages warped from age and humidity. I flip through the faces, the elbows, the half-finished hands, and there he is in all of them, bits and pieces, shadows and shapes. People ask me if I ever fell in love again. I did. Sort of. But never like that, never like Jonah. And even now, when I walk by a bar with a busted neon sign, or hear a raspy voice behind me asking for a light, I turn around just in case. Because once, in the summer of '93, love found me on a sidewalk at 2 a.m., and I've been trying to paint it ever since.